Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Plato's Apology. This is our going to be, I think this is our fifth session, if I'm not correct. If I'm correct, today we move from the first speech and now go to the second speech, which deals with in the trial there was the question of guilt or innocence. The first speech was dealing with Socrates' defense regarding his innocence or at least his argument defending himself. Apology. Now, the second speech deals with the sentence. This is the sentence. The typical Athenian jury would go first the trial, then the question of the sentence, and then if there's last words. And therefore, this is we ended the last speech with Socrates' conclusion of his defense. Now, they vote, and they vote against him. Now, unlike American juries, where it's you have a 12-man jury and to convict, you need all 12 to say yes. Greeks didn't work this way for these kind of, particularly in the trials heard by the assembly. These trials, which include treason, didn't require a majority. I mean, it didn't require a unanimous. It required a majority, and the jury sizes were huge. Though it wasn't always the full attendees of that day's assembly meetings sometimes, but it'd be those seeking to stay for the pay. Okay, um, here if it was a 500-man jury, right? This is the thing. The argument 500 plus and something. Um, 280 voted to convict, and 220 uh, um, to acquittal. Now, this is on the note 66. 64 says the italicized exploitation note inserted for the translators are into the translations are by the translators. This is not in the text. What we see here, this is not in the Greek text. This is just added in there. And 65 is a note here, and he does it there. Talks about this more curious. 280 is one half of 500 plus 30. Socrates says the change of 30 votes would have acquitted him, right? And that's why there's what he'll talk about. Now let's go right into the thing. We're using the Tom West, Grace Scary West. Now Grace died a couple years ago. Tom's still alive. He's at Hillsdale, and he teaches. He doesn't do much on Plato. He and his wife translated the four texts, and they also translated the comedies. He also did the original translation of the Apology in his commentary back in '79, and when it was first published. And this is actually the second edition. The first edition of the four texts were in the '80s, 84, 83, 84, I think. And the second edition is really 1990s, and I think there was another one in the early thousands. I'm not a third, but a kind of reprint of the second edition. I'm not correct if I'm correct. I could be my memories. I touched my memory, and I'm an old fart, so I might forget. um, so um, uh, so therefore, let's turn to at 30 or 35e at the end, but really the very end of it, where we turn to the discussion of the second speech. Okay, it goes. Many things contribute to my not being indignant, men of Athens. No, many things contribute to me not being indignant, men of Athens, at what happened. That you voted to convict me, and one of them is that happened was not was in other words that, and one of them is that what has happened was not unexpected by me. So that's the first sentence. He says, I should be an angry, but I expected this was going to happen. But this is kind of it reinforces what he said earlier. But a just man, if he got involved politically, would have been killed by the Athenians or any city in that sense. Therefore, this is like, well, I'm not. This also justifies his argument of staying private all his life and not taking any office or confronting. That here in this public act of him defending himself openly and saying things as he says them and doing things as he says doing it, always speaking the truth in this sense in his claim, and going about as he normally went about, he, in many ways, alienated many of the jurors, and many of the jurors just didn't really know what they're doing. They was taking clues from their political allies. You know, a lot of the Athenian voting. I mean, it was democracy. Those who showed up, first come, first served for the seats, would get them, and they would often, in voting, follow their factions or their demes, or their groups. And remember that there were three accusers for Socrates: Metellus for the poets, Antyllus for the craftsmen and artisans, but he was a political man, and he and Lycon for the orators, right? If I remember correctly, I may forget. Was it like no, may well, okay, whatever. I probably flipped a Lycon and Metellus. But what's important about this is what? It's important to remember that Antyllus is he is a very political man. So a lot of the the low IQ dolts out there on the jury are going to say, well, Lycus wants us to do this. Well, I'm on team Lycus. I'm on his team. I support his policy. So they're going to vote for that. Um, Sometimes Socrates' friends and people with this thing, it was a stupid thing. Why was he here? This is ridiculous. Again, this is really a divided vote, and the majority to convict is basically only 30. Like you say here, it is a 280 to 220. So technically, kind of what a 60 vote switch, and that is, and how many people didn't vote. I mean, a lot of people in that sense in the assembly that may have been there present at that event might, it's 500 plus. Usually 500, 600 people may have been there. We don't know. We don't have the complete, there's not records of who attended in that sense. I think there's, and the records of the amount of pay that was given out that hasn't really survived either. I mean, remember this was done on pottery, the shards of pottery. So therefore, a lot of things don't survive in that sense. So what we have is the record of what was recorded, the votes. Okay, and Socrates says, okay, it is, but I wonder much more at the number of the votes on each side, for I at least did not suppose that it would be so little, but by much. He thought he was going to get convicted by a bigger margin. Okay, he's saying here. Okay, right? But it is, but as it is likely that only 30 of the votes had fallen. If only 30 of the votes had fallen differently, I would have been acquitted. But if 30 voted, remember 60 votes, 30 shift, then what happens is 50-50 and no conviction. And this is that famous example from the Aeschylus' Aristoia, when the vote is divided on uh, um, um, Orestes, the Athenians. The Furies are chasing Orestes into Athens, and Athena decides to let the city judge as a democracy. She doesn't judge, right? But then votes. But then when they ask, but then she then votes at the end, and the vote is divided evenly, and she cast in favor of with her father for voting for Orestes, right? That's how the Aeschylus goes. Athena will act as the last voting, and her one vote will turn it in favor of Orestes against the Furies. But the city itself, the vote was split. Now, Socrates is saying that it was a 30 vote. If 30 votes shifted, if those 60 votes who voted over there, 30 votes shifted, it would have been a deadlock, and there would have been no conviction. So he continues. Um, so it seems to me I have now been acquitted even as far as Metellus is concerned. Now, what is he? Okay, and not only because I've been acquitted, but it's clear that everyone that if Antyllus and Lycon had not come forward to accuse me, he would not have. He would have to pay a fine of 1,000 drachmas, since he would not have gotten a fifth of the votes. In other words, he's saying this. Well, they got that 200 even if 30 shifted, right, neutral, right, but he got 280. Well, 280 divided by, would Lycon got that 280? Probably not. If, in other words, if, in other words, like a Mytilus, who did much of the real attack, if Mytilus is concerned, he would take his attack, right? He probably would not. If Mytilus alone was attacking Socrates, accusing Socrates, this would have not have. I mean, Socrates is sitting here that he wouldn't even got. He would not even got the what do you call the necessary votes to get the acquittal. In other words, he would have lost, but not only lost, but lost. He would have got, like he says, because he would not have gotten a fifth of the vote. In other words, Socrates is saying, well, wait a minute, of the 500, right? The 500 that he's assuming that's there. If that was the case, he would have gotten one. If it was only Mytilus, what is he? Divide by 3, and then that vote percent, the total would be less than 1/5 in that sense, and therefore, but therefore, what that is saying that he would have had to pay a big fine. Again, this is Socrates kind of jibbing this a little in a sense. At any rate, the man proposes death. Now, they propose death at his desert. Now, 66. The Greek word for propose one's death is temesaio, which root means simply to establish a value at a certain publicly recognized price, or the honor reward of something that has been teme honor price. The extension of by extension of the word that comes to be used in court means the assess of the punishment due. But Socrates insists on using the word in its original non-judicial sense, whereby it may refer to the worth or value of a man, good or bad. When Socrates says, "What shall I propose as my punishment?" he is also saying, "What good or bad thing do I deserve? Or how should I honor myself?" This ambiguity cannot be translated, but the reader should keep it in mind through this section. In other words, West is making it clear the Greek gives an ambiguity that translators can't translate accurately. And this is why this is what he says here. What do I deserve? The question here is the legal term. The question that is now supposed to be addressed here is this question: what does the condemned, or what does the person who's been good deserve? What punishment he does? Now, the word here, how it's been used, as West points out, also temaseni also has the same root as honor. Okay, so how, in other words, the question is how should I be honored? What honor or merit do I deserve as much as the negative? Not only punishment, but also the double ambiguity of the word between punish and reward, punish and cost, benefit. And I think the West Note 66 is very useful here and to understand the phrase. Well, this is where Socrates goes into it. And I think this is where Socrates really will get in trouble for doing this, I think. Socrates might have gotten off if he hadn't done what he's doing now, in the sense that he might have been found guilty, but then slapped on the wrist with a very minor punishment. But what he will do now will piss off even some of the people who thought, oh, this is ridiculous. But now it really pisses them off. What counter proposal shall I make to you, men of Athens? Or is it not clear that I should be whatever I am worthy of? This thing you give to me is something I should be worthy of. What then? What am I worthy to suffer or to pay because I did not keep quiet during my life, and I did not care for the things that the many do, making money and household oikonomikos, household management, and generalships, and popular oratory, and the other officers and conspiracies and factions that come to be into the city, since I held that I myself was really too decent to survive, too good too decent to survive if I went into these things. In other words, if I went into those things, I would have been killed. okay, because I'm too decent, I'm too good of a person. You have, in other words, you can't. A good person. Remember what he argued? The good person would have in such a city as Athens, where you have to appease the demos, the many, and the many don't know what the good is, and they just simply do what they want. The argument would be that the good man will always become the enemy of the many, and that the many will always look at the good man when he chastises them or confronts them with suspicion and resentment. So this is what he says, here in that sense. What then was I worthy of, that I did not keep quiet during my life, and did not care for the things that many do, money making, household management, the generalships, the strategica, um, and the popular oratories, and the other offices and conspiracies and factions that come to be in the city, since I held that I myself was really too decent to survive if I won these things. I did not. I did not go into matters where, if I did go, I would. I was going to be no benefit either to you or to myself. Instead, I went to each of you privately to perform the greatest benefaction, as I affirm that I attempted to persuade each of you not to care for anything, any of his own things, until he cares for himself, how he will be best and most prudent possible, but nor to care for the things of the city until he cares for the city itself, and to care for the other things in the same way. So, in other words, he said, "I went to him I didn't go. I didn't do anything publicly. I went privately, individually to people that before they cared for wealth and that stuff, they should care for themselves, their soul, their character, and then if they're going to care for the city, they should know what is this. Before they went to do care for the city, they should know what the city is. In other words, he says here, what not to care for the things of him until he cares for the city itself, and care for the other things in the same way. So, not to care for the things, but to really understand what's useful and what is good, and care and therefore do what is good and right. Okay, this is the Socratic kind of position here. Um, what then am I worthy to suffer, being as such? Something good, men of Athens. At least if you give me what I deserve according to my worth and truth. And besides, a good of this sort would that would be fitting for me. In other words, you should be giving. My punishment should be a reward, something fit. I should get what is deserving me, and therefore it should be something I merit. Okay, given what I've done and how I've lived, or how the benefits I've given the city in that sense. Um, is fitting, what sort of good that would be fitting me. What then what's fitting for a poor man, a benefactor, who needs to have leisure to exhort you? There is nothing more fitting, men of Athens, than for such a man to be giving his meals at the praetorium, which is more so than which much more so than any of you who has won a victory at Olympia with a horse or two or four horse chariot. Now, the praetorium, um, this is what? This is the highest honor the city gives. The meals at the praetorium is a place where in the city where the um, uh, uh, where where the city honors those who have done great deeds for Athens. They come to eat free. I mean, in other words, this is the place where they get to have their meals. This idea of the Greeks. The Greeks have this concept of like common meals or public acts and things like this. That the dinners that and most in like places like Sparta, the men would the soldiers and the citizens would the men would eat in public together. Okay, where in Athens. This was honored. This idea of gathering would be rewarded for those who have achieved great things, generals or heroes of the war, but also Olympic heroes and other things like that. People who have distinguished the city would give honor to. That this is like the Congressional Medal of Honor, or so. In England, you get the knighthoods, right? This is the equivalent of a knighthood or something like that, and you'd be in your life you'd be allowed to go there to be taken. They feed you, and you'd be able to not have to. You'd be able to eat on the meal that is presided there, right? So and he goes, so if I assassinate when in other words, if he does not make for he makes you seem happy, while I make you be so. And the ones who win horse races, the ones who win the medal Olympic victory, they make you seem happy, or I be happy, or so. He is not in need of sustenance, where I'm in need of it. I'm poor. Those people, those heroes who win these things, they're rich. They don't need it. I'm the poor guy who doesn't have money to take care of my family and things. I need it. So therefore, so if I must propose what I'm worthy of in accordance to the just, I propose this: to be given my meals at the praetum. Now again, this is like I should be given an honor, honor by the city. You think those people who, a lot of the people who voted not to convict, now are going to say, "Fuck him, Socrates, die, motherfucker." Because why? Because he just basically said that the punishment, what he deserves as a punishment, is not a punishment, but a, a reward that the city does. And this is a poke in the eye of many of the citizens, particularly those who didn't really have an agenda to go after him. In fact, um, perhaps then, when I say this, I seem to you be speaking nearly in the same way when I spoke about lament and supplication quite stubbornly. It is not like that, men of Athens, but rather like this. I am convinced that I do not do injustice to to any human being voluntarily, but I am not persuading you of this, for we have conversed with each other for a short time, since I suppose that if you had a law like other human beings, not to judge anyone in a matter of death in one day alone, but over many, you would be persuaded. In other words, that this is 68. The 11 68 is an expression of Sparta, the arch enemy of Athens. That's such a policy. In other words, he says, what country, what place has the policy on matters of death you don't have? Sparta. Okay, so he's raising that your laws are inferior to your arch enemy's laws. Okay, is this going to be something that's going to win the majority of the voters up? No, you're saying, oh no, the Soviets had a 1950s, 1960s juries people saying, oh no, your jury thing is not fair. You should have the Soviet rules. Okay, this is this is another. If it was bad enough, the first poke in the face with the recommendation for the meals at the Praetanium. The second one of that, you should have a different law, more multiple. Because if our laws were like Sparta's laws, I would have more time to talk, and I would have persuaded you. I only had one short time and didn't have enough time to persuade you. Um, but as it is, it's not easy in a short time to do away with great slanders. In other words, he couldn't deal with all of the early perceptions of slanders that were said by the early accusers, in a sense. Now, next paragraph. But I'm being convicted indeed that I do not do injustice to anyone, am far as from doing injustice to myself, and from saying against myself that I am myself am worthy of something bad, and from possessing this sort of thing as my desert. In other words, is it right that I would ask for something bad? Because do I deserve something bad? No, I've done nothing wrong voluntarily. So, what would I fear? That I might suffer what Metellus proposes for me, about which I said I do not know whether it's good or bad. In other words, Metellus wants me to die, so my punishment is I should suffer death. I don't really know that you're saying I should take something less bad for me than something I don't know that's bad for me in that sense. Um, Or indeed this, should I choose something from among these things that I know are bad and propose them? Should it be prison? And why should I live in jail, enslaved to an authority that is regularly established there? The 11. Okay, in other words, and or money and imprisonment until I pay. But for me, this is the same as what I was just saying now. For I have no money to pay. In other words, if you offer make me pay something, I'm not going to be able to. I'll be locked until I'm paid for it. I won't. I don't have any money to pay for it, so I'll be in jail. And the jail is I'm subject to the abuse of the 11 of those who have chosen the prisons. So why would I choose, or why should I give my since I don't think I did anything to merit any punishment? Why should I propose something? And my choice is between something I know that is bad, prison and imprisonment, versus where I lose my freedom and that, and death that I don't know is bad. Right? I have no knowledge that it's bad or not. Well, I should propose exile then, for perhaps you would grant me this my as my desert. I would certainly be possessed by the love of soul. I would certainly be possessed by much love of soul, men of Athens, if I were so unreasonable that I were not able to reason that you who are my fellow citizens were not able to bear my ways of spending time in my speeches, but that instead that they have become quite gravesome and hateful to you, so that you are now seeking to be released from them. Will others then bear them easily? If you, Athens, get tired of me, would other cities be willing to accept someone who's like me and doing it? Right? So that's one thing. Far from it, men of Athens. Beautiful indeed would life be for me if a human being at my age to go in exile and live exchanging one city for another, always being driven out. In other words, is it going to be great that I go from one city, someone my age, I'm old, I'm going to be going from one city to the next city, always being driven out because I can't be stand. But okay. Um, uh, uh, for I know well that wherever I go, the young men will listen to me when I speak, just as they do here. And I will drive, and if I drive them away, they will drive me out by persuading their elders. If I do not drive them away, the far fathers and families will drive me out because of these same ones. So the same thing happened here in that sense. Perhaps then someone might say, by being silent and keeping quiet, Socrates, why don't you won't be able to live? Won't you be able to live in exile for us? It is hardest of all to persuade some of you about this. For if I say that this is to disobey the God, and that because of this it is impossible to keep quiet, you will not be persuaded of me on the grounds that I am being ironic. Okay, now this is that idea, not ironic. Erosumene is to dissemble. That is to say less than one thinks, to present oneself as less than one is. The opposite of irony is boastfulness, claiming to be more than one is, right? So less than one is, understatement in that sense, right? And on the other hand, if I say that even that this even happens to be a very, in other words, and on the other hand, if I say that this happens to be a very great good for a human being to make speeches every day about virtue and and the other things about which you hear me conversing and examining both myself and others, and that the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being, if you will persuaded by me still less when I say these things. In other words, these things. That's it. In other words, all these things. On the other hand, if I say that even even happens to be a very good for a human being to make speeches every day about virtue and other things which you hear me conversing, examine myself and others, and that the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being, you will be persuaded by me still less when I say these things, right? This is the way it is, and I affirm, men, but to persuade you, it's not easy. In other words, given how I live, given how I speak, you're not gonna buy if I recommend. Oh, I'll be quiet. You're not gonna be quiet. Okay. And if I have to go abroad, I'll be quiet. Learn how to be quiet, either abroad or home, and not cause trouble. No, he's gonna keep on doing it. Because why? Because he said these things like the way he did it, and this is not gonna. We won't believe him in that sense. In other words, given what he said and how he's argued and things he said about things, he would kind of be. And if he doesn't make the claim, make a less claimful thing, they'll think he's being ironic. Or if he tells the truth about this in that sense, or even does something opposite of this, would be contradicting himself. So, um, uh, so again, this is the way it is, and I affirm, men of Athens. But to persuade you is not easy. Next, at 38b, end of 39A and then B. At the same time, I'm not accustomed to deem myself worthy of anything bad. For if I had money, I would propose as much money as I could pay. For that you would not harm me. Money, I mean, doesn't harm me. Taking my money. I don't care about money, so taking my money away from me is not going to harm me. So, but I don't have much money to give you. Um, um, but as it is, I do not have any, unless, of course, you wish me to propose as much money as I am able to pay. Perhaps I would be able to pay you, say, a mina of silver. So I propose that much. A mina of silver is nothing. It's a very trivia thing. A mina consists of 100 drachma, a fairly small amount for a fine. So therefore, is not a big fine. But Plato here, Plato, who's in the audience apparently, men of Athens, and Crito and Crippus say, and Apollodorus. So therefore, Plato, Crito, and his son, and Apollodorus bid me to propose 30 mina. Now, 30 mina is a quite substantial sum of money, and they will stand as guarantors. So I propose. In other words, those three people, Plato, Crito, Crito and his son, and Apollodorus, all say, Socrates, 30 mina, please, we get this money, and this is a big sum. But the way he's done it, he poked him in the eye about the honors of that. Then he poked. If he didn't go about this and just said, I can propose 30 mina, this might have gone that way quickly. Okay, I think the same vote would have, and actually much higher vote would have done it. But now death, what happened was in other words, this might have flipped in a way that they would have agreed. They would have easily agreed to, in fact, a minor punishment. Okay, but now but he alienated them so that he got the greater punishment. So I propose that much, and they will be trustworthy guardians of the money. So they will be trustworthy guardians of the money. So therefore, he's proposing thing at the end. Now, if he did that at first, he might have. It would have been he would have been found out, and it would have been punished enough. But this is how it ends. Here we'll end. We'll end and do the last one. The next we'll end our examination of this with the last section. What happens to the vote, and here we'll stop. So, well, if you've liked this, please, first of all, if you have any comments or questions, please put them below. I will respond as soon as I see them. If you liked it, like it. If you share it with a friend, you want more, do subscribe. Share on social media, please, if you like this. Please spread the word. I'm just trying to build up this. And again, have a nice day. Okay, you can follow me on social media below. Again, have a nice day. Take care. Bye bye.